Well, hi, everybody. It's the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we get together and tackle the previous week in football and or soccer. But we don't always get together because Dunny, our dear friend, is already on his holidays. And we tried to get him to record something today. We called him, we texted him, and he quite literally said, no, I'm on holiday. And that seems fair enough. So I will just say this is our last program of the end of this season. Dunny's having a couple of weeks off. He's the hardest working man in showbiz. He's earned it. Then I'm having 3 weeks off. I don't work as hard, but I have less energy. So we're going to reconvene doing Week in the Tackle at some point in the latter stage of the European Championship. And when does Copa America start? I haven't got the date on that. I'm not working that. Is that mid-July, early June? When's that?
It's June 14th. It's the same day as the Euros.
Oh, it's same time.
Yes.
So it's latter stage. So we're going to be together. You see, I've not done my research yet. I'm fully emotionally moved on. We're going to reconvene for the latter stage of the Copa America and the European Championship, and then we'll all be back to work. We'll press on from there. And at the end of this summer, all being well, we're going to be together live, the three of us, in Columbus, Ohio. I know, it's weird, right? We're going to be together as a trio in Columbus, Ohio, around MLS All-Star, doing some stuff for SiriusXM FC, but we'll also do some live stuff for Week in the Tackle. We haven't worked it out yet. Mainly because Danny went on holiday, I'm going on holiday, and Tim's going on holiday. So we are where we are. Tim Horsey is here alongside me, our intrepid producer who puts these shows together. Tim, how are you feeling about covering for Dunny for our brief end of series show? Have you got the Dunny impression down? Are you going to say things like verbalize?
I think I started with the look. So if you're watching on YouTube or on Spotify, I tried to find my flattest brim hat. You know, I gotta kind of move it up just a little bit here.
Should have had one.
For the watcher here. I think if I hold it like this, that's flat enough. That's kind of very Dunny-y. No, but I'm trying to fill his stead. I'm obviously going to talk a lot more about Liverpool than Manchester United. I should say, for the people that are going to come after me, most notably U.S. men's national team fans, I guess I Euro snobbed it a bit. Copa America actually starts June 20th. It's just after the Euros, but they both end on the same day, July 14th. So that's what I was getting confused with. But yeah, I'm ready to fill in, albeit on a brief episode of Week in the Tackle here, to talk about maybe a little bit of Arne Slot do, which I think we're going to get into as well.
Wait, do you not know the song?
I don't remember the song off the top of my head now.
You don't know the song Life is Life? Is it Life is Live? Live is Life.
Do you know the song?
Apparently not. I thought I did, but I lost it immediately. Hang on, I Google it now. Live is Life is Life. It's by Opus. Live is Life. Live is Life? That doesn't make sense. But we might sing it a lot moving forward. I don't know. I love Jurgen Klopp singing it, and it made Arne Slot's just kind of thirsty public chasing of the Liverpool job seem less pathetic, which is great. You know what we should do? I think I can't use my phone during these recordings because I'm using the phone for the high quality cam. Text Dunny and just text him to say, we're recording the show. Do you have a final end of series message to our listeners? And he's got about 10 minutes to reply. And if not, remember, listeners, that I love you, Tim likes you, and Dunny hates you. Listen, a few things to wrap up today's program. And again, we are going to be back for a brand new series during the Euros and onwards, but this is the end of our kind of 11-month run covering the European football season. So we're all tired. But there's a few things I do want to cover. Now, the last day of the season, as TalkSport's international editor and covering our Premier League Live international coverage, I'm overseeing the show, right? So I'm overseeing this day. It's a big day. It's a huge logistical day. It's a huge delivery day. We're broadcasting to partners all around the world, every single game simultaneously. It's a big sort of job, which everyone, I've got to say, our entire team did an amazing job delivering everything. The technical team, there were no problems. And even with a 15-minute overrun, which really annoyed me, we still got everything out and nobody went off air, which is, you know, the number one thing we want, followed by the quality. Number one, just deliver the contractual obligation. But I'm overseeing the show, right? So I'm with John Anderson, I'm with David Connolly. We're overseeing the show. We're waiting for City to come out. And I've got to tell you this. Now, I'm getting some grief about this week from our football shows on SiriusXM FC. I am not and don't have strong formed opinions about Manchester City. I don't have them yet. Not in the same way that, you know, when you're a child, you have this like, I never want Man U to win or Liverpool to win or whatever your generational giant team were. I don't have them yet, But I do think I'm getting them, and I do think we're all getting them now about Manchester City, because watching them parade at the Etihad Stadium, watching the pitch invasion is kind of what got me, I think. But watching it, I've got to say, I just felt incredibly empty about Man City lifting the Premier League title. I I was watching it almost feeling just hollow. And I've not always said that with Manchester City. You know, everyone remembers the Aguero moment. Everyone sort of felt pleased for them, even begrudgingly, I think people did. Even those teams of Chelsea who had spent monumental money, but within the rules as laid out by the Premier League at the time, you could feel a sense of happiness for them at least the first couple of times when they won it. Even when Man City won the Champions League last year, I did feel a semblance of what a great achievement for Pep Guardiola, the grief he has had from all of football about going to Man City, being super backed and not winning it. I could feel a sense of happiness about it. But it just felt wrong. This felt, Tim, like a bad, bad day for English football. The celebrations were, City fans get some grief, but it felt as wild as a Mary Berry Christmas special. Watching the fans on the field and the smiles of some of the players, it felt disingenuous. It felt like the great train robbers having a cocktail on the beach. They know what's coming. They can feel the authorities breathing down their neck. They know the next thing is to fly back to London in handcuffs and face the consequences. That continues the great train robber theme. And the reason for it, of course, is the charges, right? Now, I have had so much grief this week. Tim, you put a video up on our social media, the SiriusXM FC socials this week about, some of my very complicated thoughts about Manchester City.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, I mean, it's right. I think it was a good point. I stand by it. Some of the things I say I don't stand by, but that I still do. And they are not guilty, okay? They are currently not guilty. However, they have not stood up to face the allegations that are thrown at them. And those allegations are 54 failures to provide accurate financial information from 2009 to 2018. It's 14 failure to provide accurate details for player and manager payments from 2009 to 2018. It's 5 failure to comply with UEFA's rules, including financial fair play from 13 to 18. It's 7 breaching Premier League's PSR rules 15 to 18. It's 35 failures to cooperate with Premier League investigations 18 to 23. In total, 115 breaches. Of course, going back to 2014, they were fined near £50 million for issues they had with financial fair play at the time. There was at some point a ban from European competition that was lifted from the Court of Arbitration for Sport. But one of the issues with that was that they ran out of time with the appeal and the process for that to really come to satisfactory fruition for people who like fair play. So there's all these issues going on. And Everton and Nottingham Forest, for good or for ill, complied with authorities, took their punishment, appealed, but then took their punishment and got their points deductions. Man City have obfuscated, they have blocked, they have prevented, and one of the accusations is failed to cooperate with these investigations. Now, this is why it hangs over, I think, this whole story, because they have blocked and denied, and maybe at some point they'll be proved innocent. And I really, really hope they are, because if they are, we can marvel at this incredible football team with a genius manager, the coach of his generation, with this incredibly well-built squad, with clever business in the transfer market, with clever sales in the transfer market. Last summer, was it Mahrez, Laporte, and there was someone else for money? The previous summer, Raheem Sterling goes for 50 million. I mean, what business that is to sell Raheem Sterling for 50 million, who's not, according to Gareth Southgate, in the 33 best players England currently have going into the European Championship, but they were able to make that happen. Cole Palmer was the other one this summer. Look, less smart move now, but at the time, to get that money for someone with no real reputation, it's brilliant business. So I want to say, wow, that's the blueprint. The trouble is these charges hang. And if they are found guilty of 1, like Everton, or 2, like Nottingham Forest, then there'll need to be similar points deduction, 6 points, 8 points, 10 points was the original suggestion for Everton. If 115 are proved, I don't know what we do. What I do know, Tim, and I'd love your view on this. I've given mine a lot and you've had to hear it a lot. But, if they are proven, I actually don't know. And this worries me genuinely. I don't know if the Premier League recovers. I don't know if English football recovers. I don't know if any of these individual players will be able to stand by their trophies, their medals, their record, their reputation. I don't know if anything on the sand we currently stand will remain as is, if even some of these are proven true. And again, we don't know, but the fact there's that grey cloud over it gives me this sense of ick around the whole thing.
Yeah, I see. You're closer to the situation in terms of how this could destroy English football, or they'll never be the same again. So I can't speak to that as much, but just from a fan perspective, it's so hard for me as a Liverpool fan. You know, the chief rival to Man City for so many years, and I could sit here and say, "Oh, we should have won more," and you know, if they're found guilty, like I'm claiming the 97 point title, yada yada, and all that, and that's fair and fine and what have you. But if I was a City fan, and look, you've seen this a lot because of your stances and on both here and Sirius XMFC and the sovereign wealth fund joke and all that fun stuff. You know, you get a lot of abuse for it, but I don't understand a City fan who is so staunchly defending this when it seems so obviously corrupt. Like, I'm all for, and you and I agree, and again, biases here and what have you, but I don't like watching City play. I find them incredibly boring. I've been lucky enough to be blessed with a team that actually suits the style that I like, which is just basically chaos in Liverpool for all these years under Jurgen Klopp. But outside of that, trying to staunchly defend this team who we all think is cheated, I wouldn't be able to do that as a fan. I wouldn't be, and we've had people call in and text in to Sirius XMFC. We've had people comment on our shows here on YouTube and review on Spotify here on Week in the Tackle that are City fans that kind of say the same thing of like, yeah, these 4 titles have been great. I love Pep Guardiola. Watching Kevin De Bruyne in my light blue all the time is fantastic. But it's hard to marry that with the impending doom that I think is coming from Man City. And imagine trying to be a Man City fan, and you'll know this more, like obviously being over there in England, or if you're in Manchester, the abuse that Man City fans are going to have to take from Man United fans and Liverpool fans if they're found guilty, if titles are stripped. You're never going to live that down. Like, they're still singing the Steven Gerrard slip song at every ground when Liverpool plays. Imagine the songs and things that are going to come out of Man City's charges if this all comes to fruition. And like you said, you kind of mentioned it with the train robbers on the beach. It kind of reminds me, if you ever played Red Dead Redemption 2 and you're a Manchester City fan and you're Arthur Morgan and you're this gang of ne'er-do-wells just committing crimes across the West, and everything's going great, but there's always this sense of it's going to go wrong. But don't worry, Dutch has another plan. I got another plan, Arthur. You got this whole thing going. He's got another plan. He's got another plan. They're going to extend this out for as long as possible until Arthur Morgan gets TB, and spoiler alert if you haven't played, it came out, 6 years ago at this point, dies in the worst possible way. I just feel like that is coming for City. And yeah, it's going to be bad for English football, and I'll let you speak more to that. But as a City fan, I would dread this. It would be the only thing I was thinking about. Like, how can I celebrate these 4 titles when I know the other shoe is going to drop?
Yeah, I mean, and even if it doesn't, right? Let's say it doesn't. You've still got the fact they just would not comply with these investigations. They would not show, yeah, look, here's our books. Here it is. We are clean as a whistle, and here's what happened. And that's another element to it, that the owners of the club have allowed this to hang. And that is something none of us really want to be talking about. But we have to talk about it because there is in this particular sport, in this particular league, right? It's the money, you moron, right? As we always say, the Giorgio Canaglia line. We're always saying it. In the end, it is the money league, and most money wins, highest wage bill wins, and that's pretty much what the Premier League has become. It's true in every league, but it didn't used to be as true in the Premier League. And there is still a decent amount of wealth distribution in the Premier League compared to other certainly leagues in Europe, but it's still not as good as it could be. It's still not as I would want it, which is most money goes to bottom team that stays in the league, and they can actually buy better players and there's competition. Instead, we have teams that have dynasties and they steal your best players. The Champions League money has skewed football in an awful, awful way, which is only going to get worse until regulators come in to actually give a better distribution of wealth, which they're not going to do. But whatever. That's all been true. However, there's still a framework. There is still a framework that you're meant to adhere to. There is still a financial framework you're meant to adhere to. And if they can't say, oh, we did, or we did to the best of our ability, and they don't want to say it, and they don't want to see this come forward, it's always going to tarnish it. And there is nothing anyone can say to kind of push me off that. And the other element too, which has kind of annoyed me, is that, look, City fans understandably right now have a massive chip on their shoulder. Of course they do, right? Absolutely. And there are some that I have had a few kind of rows with that I think have a massive persecution complex. And you could tell that in a few pieces I read the other week, which was like, Man City, of course we're still enjoying it. How can you say we're not enjoying it? People are always talking about our fans not being super into it or whatever. And it's like, no, we know you enjoy it. But in terms of the dominance of someone like Bayern, we don't think you should experience it every year. Something I'm always saying here about that famous Celtic video I watched. It's like, 35 trophies in a row. You don't think we love it. No, we think you love it. We think it's wrong you get it every year. We think Aberdeen fans deserve it and Hearts fans deserve it. And we need to create an ecosystem where that's possible. And you winning the league every year is rubbish. Rubbish for you and for everybody else. So we think you love it. We just think that maybe there should be a system in place to make you share it around. But that persecution complex of they don't think we're good fans, we're too dominant, we didn't win anything fairly. I think they all know. Of course they all know. Unless they're real morons. They all know. And it just needs to come to a head. But I couldn't enjoy it. I don't like to watch the Guardiola team anyway, which, I don't think he's part of it. But what I haven't liked is I watched Match of the Day, and there was this conversation between Alan Shearer and Ian Wright and Gary Lineker, all former footballers, all football shows, sidebar. Someone in there who needs to not be a footballer because sometimes it becomes all the guys in the locker room talking about things that, I'm not going to ask you that question. I'm going to ask you because I'm not in the group. There's a reason presenters are often, there's a degree of separation in there. They're not meant to be best friends and they're not meant to be all from the same background. But that's just me. I think Gary Lineker asking Alan Shearer about being a great goal scorer is kind of redundant if Gary Lineker was a better striker, right? Doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, they had this conversation and they were like, well, you can't take anything away from the players. And I thought, well, actually, you can. You can because Pep Guardiola is in this up to his eyeballs. Soriano and Begiristain, all these guys, they've built a club around him. There's no way he just closes that shutter, knows nothing about what's happening. Doesn't he question how they can afford to have Mateus Nunes and Jeremy Doku on the bench, whereas Arsenal have Eddie Nketiah and Liverpool have Harvey Elliott? I'm not trying to disparage those players, but they're not £60 million huge wage players. So they have to question it. We all know who we work for, right? Everyone knows who they work for. And the other element too is the players know that too. And again, they're not responsible, but they're not ignorant. It's like henchmen. That famous thing in Austin Powers? No one ever considers the life of a henchman. And is it John Smith gets his head eaten off by the piranhas? And it's like they knew they worked at Virtucon, right? Eventually, there was going to be some sort of spy that came along and killed them. So you haven't got to be responsible, but you're not ignorant to it. If you go in a room and you're like, I'm a Man City player, that comes with baggage. All our employment comes with a certain element of baggage, some more than others. So I don't agree with that. I certainly don't agree with it from a Guardiola perspective. And all these players that are kind of celebrating this stuff, they can read. And when this happens, what do? Do they have a go at the ownership group? Because when the bailiffs turn up to take the medals from the trophy cabinet of Kevin De Bruyne, can he say I was totally ignorant of this? I don't know. And again, I don't know if that's going to happen. Hopefully it won't, but it's there. It's there as a spectre. And I just don't agree. You can't take anything from the players because there's a reason all these players play together. And that's because City are able to afford it. They assure the players they're doing it legally. And again, let's hope that they are. But if they are not, surely you ask a few questions. And people always say, oh, what about the spend? Look at the wage bill at Man United. According to the last set of accounts, the Man City wage bill was around £100 million more than Man United. Now, you might have some variables on that, but it's still more. And if it's more, you have to justify more within the framework that's been created for you. An FFP, it's crap. It was created by all these clubs that were great in the 1960s, and they tried to close the shop to stop Chelsea, right? Everybody knows this. However, with all the kind of manipulation of those old super clubs, there was an element too of competitiveness, a drive for competitiveness. And if we had that legitimately, football would be a better thing, in my opinion. But in the end, even if you had the advantage going in, even if, to use an Americanism, you were on second base when everyone else was, what's the first one? On first base? No base?
First base,
right?
yeah.
So you're on first base, right? But everyone else is on third. Even if you start on third and they start on first, from that point, there is still a framework of rules. And if you couldn't even follow that, if you were owned by a country, I don't know. The punishment to me needs to be quite severe. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. That's all I'm going to say on that, probably forever, because I'm just so bored of it now.
Good job, by the way, on the baseball analogy. That was pretty good. That was pretty. You were in the ballpark, as they would say. On that
good.
Analogy. Yeah.
Take me out to the ball game.
Wow, look at him.
I know. I liked going to the baseball, except for all like it was too much like Lil Wayne and stuff being played on the stereo on the tannoys. Is that a real one? That feels like a real one. Lil Bob.
Wayne is real.
Lil Wayne, Lil Bob, Lil John, all the Lils. Two other quick bits before we're out of time on today's show. And again, we're going to reconvene at the back end of the Copa America and the European Championship in July, when Dunny and I have got, I was going to say tans there, but I'm tan. Arsenal, a quick word on them. I'd love your view as well, Tim, but I just want to mention that on a program we did, I got the date, on the 2nd of April.
Keep receipts, gentlemen.
I do keep the receipts. Dunny and I were here together, and Dunny said, quote, "This is not the game that's going to win or lose Arsenal the Premier League title." Tom Rennie, also hosting the show that day, said Arsenal needed to be bolder and braver and had to beat Manchester City to be champions. In the end, Man City won the league by 2 points. Now, we've made our positions pretty clear on the fairness of it all, but on the football of it all, if you're going to win the league, you need to beat Manchester City twice. As Ric Flair famously said, if you're going to be the man, you've got to beat the man. And I said that to Dunny right here 6 weeks ago, and he poo-pooed it. Everybody poo-pooed it because, it's a whole season. It's not true. It's not true. The main thing is beat Manchester City twice. And if you do that, you still might not win. But that's how you have a chance. They need to lose 5 games for it to be competitive. Arsenal lost 5 games and couldn't win it. City didn't lose that amount. And that's your problem. You've got to beat them twice. Someone else has got to beat them twice. And they drop points in the only derby they have, which is Man United. No one else gives enough of a toss for the Man City game to be a derby, unlike Arsenal who have 7 or 8 derbies, right? And everyone still wants to beat Man United. So they get that advantage too. And they didn't beat them. And everyone was like, well, you go there low block. You got to do what you got to do. It's a really good point. It wasn't a good point. Jurgen Klopp would never have accepted that. When Liverpool have been champions, he went there to win. And if they scored that late breakaway goal, wasn't it a Martinelli Trossard breakaway? They've executed it perfectly. If you don't, that's why you don't win the league. And I was right. And you know who agrees with me? Rodri. Rodri's on the field, lifting the title, and he says, where did we win it? It was the mentality. When Arsenal came here, they were celebrating a draw. And that's why they didn't win the league. So if I think it, and Rodri thinks it, Dunny was wrong, Tim, wasn't he?
We love saying this when he's not here. Pick on the guys when they're not here. I think, you look at, and you made the point there. Look at the team that has challenged Man City the most in this run, and they would never sit back. They went to Man City to disrupt Man City, not let Man City play their game. The teams that have beaten, I think Palace had a couple of years in a row where they would beat Man City. It might have been 2 years in a row where they beat them at the Etihad, and it wasn't the most conservative. Now, they didn't have the players that Liverpool did, so they had to be a bit more conservative, but they still went and attacked Man City there and kind of tried to startle them, and that is what worked. And for me too, outside of the Liverpool point, Arsenal has the players to do that. That's the thing that confuses me the most. You have, very talented attacking players in that Arsenal side where they could have challenged Man City man for man, I think that they are up, the depth and everything that we just talked about, maybe not the exact same, but they're pretty close in comparison, especially when you're just looking at starting 11s with Man City and Arsenal, for me anyway. So to abandon your plan for Mikel Arteta to basically be scared of dad and be scared of Pep Guardiola going to dad's house and being worried about him after you've already graduated, you've already moved out of the house, you're your own man now, and you come back and you still cower at the feet of your father. I thought it was the worst. It was the worst plan there. And look, hindsight bias and all that, but Tom, it doesn't pain me to say this, but I try not to inflate your ego too much. You were exactly right a couple weeks ago when you said that Arsenal got it wrong, and that's what lost them the title.
And look, it's worth noting these are a high end set of critiques here. These are the greatest players in European football, and for anyone to criticise Arsenal for 89 points in the Premier League season is a bit spurious. But that's the topic of conversation we are currently having. They've still been incredible, but the trouble is you have to be almost unbelievably good to beat Man City, and they weren't. And you've got to beat them twice. And I move forward now with that. With whenever we get to the new season, we talk about what's to come. I will say if anyone's going to be champion, you've got to beat Man City twice as a baseline. If you don't beat them twice, you ain't going to be champion. And that's my baseline for every time I do a preview moving forward. What about Jurgen Klopp's final game? Tim, give us your view on that as a Liverpool fan. Plus, of course, the thirsty Arnie. Thirsty Arnie Slot is now your new manager, as sung by Jurgen to the post-match.
Yeah, first on the Arnie Slot thing, it didn't worry me until you brought it up of like, man, he is really desperate for this job. And it's one of those things where they don't come around too often. You got to take them when you get them. But to be so desperate to be the man right after the man, where they always say you want to be the man after the man after the man, have the David Moyes buffer at Manchester United and get rid of the Sir Alex thing and then try and move on. Although I'm sure that's worked out well at Manchester United. I'm a bit worried. I don't know anything about Arne Slot. I don't watch a lot of Eredivisie, so let's see what happens. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, especially because of who selected Slot to be the next manager. I think that was actually Xabi Alonso when he said no to the job, but we'd have to see from there. But on the Klopp thing, we talked about it a little bit on Sirius XMFC. I think I was more emotional the day that he announced he was leaving, and because it's been so long since that point, because it's also been the team has fallen off a bit, and we've talked about this. They all kind of look exhausted. Klopp looks like he's ready to go. He has admitted as such that he is absolutely exhausted. That's the main reason that he's leaving Liverpool, is because it's too taxing. I, I was I was certainly emotional at his final day. I think they handled it really well. It was nice that it was kind of a comfortable win. So from like the 85th minute on, they're just singing the Klopp song, and like it's just more of a party than a football match at that point. Um, I've said this multiple times for people that have listened on Sirius XMFC and listened, here when I pop in and out. I became a Liverpool fan around 2009-ish because as an American, you don't American who doesn't have any British ties whatsoever, you don't really have sort of a connection to a team. And so what do most kids my age do if they want to start following European soccer? They pick the team they play with in FIFA a lot. And I loved Fernando Torres, and I played with Liverpool all the time. And because I wanted to dive into soccer and I'm a sports fanatic, I decided to follow Liverpool. And then I find these connections where it's very a blue collar harbor town that is exactly like Baltimore, which is where I'm from, which kind of is, a lucky link in that way. But you never really felt the connection until Jurgen Klopp comes in and he kind of builds back this mentality from not only the team but the fan base of what you heard about. When I went in to study the history of Liverpool, it's all the connection between the city and the club and all these things, and it felt like Klopp kind of, from an outside perspective, again, this is somebody who I've been to Anfield one time in my life. I've seen Liverpool play twice in actual competitions, once at Stamford Bridge and once at Anfield. And so, I'm not the expert to speak on this, but even coming through the television screen and coming through the radio when you're listening on Sirius XMFC, you could kind of feel that connection there, and it built with small moments. The Adam Lallana goal against Norwich is like a famous goal in Liverpool history now, even though it was against Norwich, because it was a 5-4, and it started to build this belief that they could do this. Dejan Lovren against Dortmund in the Europa League. Obviously, corner taken quickly against Barcelona. Jurgen Klopp gave me all of these moments as a Liverpool fan, as a sports fan in general, that I'll never forget. And I'm happy that he's going out on his own terms. I'm terrified of what the future holds, but he's kind of left them in a decent position with some really talented players. So, I guess Arne Slot's in at Liverpool. I guess we're just big Arne Slot guys now, and hopefully he's a bit better than the ball down the road at Old Trafford. We'll have to see.
Do the song. Do the song. People want the song.
Arne Slot. Da 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 da. Arne Slot. Da 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 da. There you go. That's all I got for you.
It's good. Listen, let's wrap up with a hero and villain of the season. The Premier League season is over. I'll give you mine, and you can think about one, Tim, being as I didn't tell you I was going to ask you that. My hero of the season, or my conceptual hero of the season, I would say is what Aston Villa have done. Because I think the Premier League at the moment is not in the best of health, I've got to say. I think that we've discussed the Man City thing at length, but I would say that with the rise of Newcastle and even the fall of Manchester United, we are still in a scenario where Man U finished 8th, Newcastle finished 7th, Chelsea 6th, who have had a, at times, disastrous season. But still, if you look at wage bills and what's organised the league in terms of the size of the wage bill, it's broadly where everybody finished. And there might be a couple of little anomalies here, little anomaly there. And I know Aston Villa's wage bill is massive, right? So I'm not saying that that's been a particular success story, because if they didn't make the Champions League this year, there would have needed to be a huge redress of the financial situation at Aston Villa. However, Villa have never played Champions League football. Now, I know it annoys some of our listeners who are like, oh, don't they play in the European Cup? There was a rebrand in 1992, okay? That's the way it works. I don't think that the Europa League is the UEFA Cup. They're not the same thing. They were rebranded. They're different competitions. I know. What can I do? They played the European Cup. They won it in 82. The last time they played European football at that level was the following year when they played as holders. They've never played in the top-tier European Cup since then. No one thought they were going to make it. And the fact they have and done it with great style at times. 20 wins from 38, 76 goals scored. The rise of Ollie Watkins, which I love to see, English players being brilliant in the English league. We've got no bloody managers, so we might as well enjoy a few players. So I do like that story. Villa Park being a four-standard, brilliant old throwback of a stadium. I love it. And then beating Arsenal and Villa, Arsenal and Man City at home this season were great stories. Then being in the title race briefly with 15 games to go was a great story. So for me, they are my hero of the season because they have upset the top six. And the top six needs not just to be broken up, it needs to be destroyed. It needs to be ripped from its foundation and taken to its very genesis. We don't need a top six, a big six, a super six, which inexplicably Tottenham Hotspur remain in, despite the fact they never win anything. That needs to go. And I think Villa being in the top four is a great element of it, as West Ham being in the top six and Leicester being in the top 6 and 4 in recent times has done. We need more of it. And I think the joy the neutral has found with Aston Villa making that top 4 is maybe something the Premier League should start thinking about. We need different stories. I need different fans. I need different localities and all this sort of stuff. We don't need the best players from Brighton going to Liverpool and West Ham going to Arsenal and Fulham going to whatever, Tottenham. We don't need that. What we need is those players to be able to stay where they are, get a big wage, other players come in, and next year the top 4 is Bournemouth, Fulham, Everton. We need to create a scenario where that can happen. And currently it doesn't exist. No one seems to have the appetite to do it. But Villa making the top 4 does give me some hope of it, though the one negative, of course, is that winning the Conference League isn't for everyone. Tim, who's your hero?
I have a couple here. It's hard because, again, I wasn't prepped for this. I do want to give a shout out to Luton Town. Nobody gave Luton Town a chance. I think, we do a Giorgio Mug competition on Sirius XMFC. Pretty sure all 35 people who participated this year had Luton Town to go down, and they still went down. But it was a valiant effort, I think, from them. A very small club. I will miss all of the shots from NBC and when the games are on Peacock of people going through the away stand, which is literally through somebody's garden and like through their house, getting into the ground. So I kind of have them as a hero. I think another joking one for you. You called this. You wanted this. Sheffield United gave up over 100 goals. They did it, guys. 104 came. The 100th came on the final day, or second to final day, the penultimate day, I believe, against Everton, and they gave up 3 more for good measure against Tottenham Hotspur. And then because he's not here, I have to do this one for Dunny. Eric Ten Hag for just driving Brian Dunseth absolutely crazy. Manchester United with their worst ever Premier League finish. You know, our week in the tackle WhatsApp group that we have. I'll say this: I love him, but it's a lot of Dunny. It's a
Yeah.
lot of Dunny talking that ish. I don't feel like editing that. Yeah, so thank you, Tim, for during games. Anytime Liverpool concedes a goal, anytime West Ham concedes a goal, 30 seconds after, Dunny's going to text you. And I don't do a lot of talking in there, but I do a lot of listening. And then Dunny started to crack because of Eric Ten Hag and not taking responsibility for any of the disasters that were going on at Old Trafford with the Red Devils. So Eric Ten Hag, for me personally, a hero of mine this Premier League season, just for making Dunny absolutely nuts. Hope you enjoy your vacation, Dunny. Hopefully, no more Eric Ten Hag for you. Although something tells me he's going to be around next year.
I feel like he's going to stay, and I really,
Too.
really hope he does. Because I tell you what, for someone to take the slings and arrows that Eric Ten Hag has had and still retain that wonderful personality and sense of joy, it's a real achievement. Our villains. I'll give you a villain. I was going to do the bottom three, but you've made me feel bad about doing it now because the Sheffield United story was funny.
It was funny.
And it remains funny because, the Carlos Tevez thing for me, it still annoys me now that we had to pay them money for being crap and getting relegated because we had Carlos Tevez, who was useless for 30 games of the 38 the season we stayed up and they didn't, whatever. Ruined West Ham's budget for like 5 years, again, whatever. And also Luton Town, yeah, I mean, look, 26 points. To go to not even make a fist of it when two of the teams above you got a points deduction, it's kind of pitiful. But anyway, you made me feel bad about that. So I'll pick a couple of villains for you. And one of them is Vincent Kompany. The two managers I'm picking as villains, because Vincent Kompany had this really kind of thrilling team in the Championship, ultra possession football, and did it against, I don't want to say against all the odds, because if you get relegated from the Premier League, you get this monumental budget with parachute payments and whatnot. But still, to change from a decade of Sean Dyche to what he did, it was, in a way, against all odds and expectations. So to win the way they did was fantastic. He came to the Premier League and was just like, it's like he'd never seen it before, right? Just total naivete all the way through the season. One home win in the opening, like 12, 15 games, 5 across the season, 78 conceded. In the end, Vincent Kompany didn't manage a Premier League team. He almost did it offhand this season. And there's a reason Sam Allardyce and Tony Pulis and Roy Hodgson, these cats keep coming back, because they realize after a while, we need some points here. Points first, performances later. In the end, Burnley did neither. I'd argue they played pretty badly as well a lot of the season. And my other villain, briefly, is Roberto De Zerbi. Like, who on earth does Roberto De Zerbi think he is? He has achieved nothing as a coach in the game. Fabio Capello called him a third-tier manager this week. And frankly, he's right. And the way Brighton played in those Europa League games against Roma was dumb. Super dumb. At 2-0 down, they didn't just try to hold on for dear life. And look, West Ham did that against Leverkusen, right? And it didn't work out for them in the end, but it made the second leg competitive in a way the Roma game wasn't. So a lot of criticism to De Zerbi on that score. And secondarily, where did he think he was? Like, if you signed for Brighton, you know the Brighton model. They explain the model to you on your way in. And the way he sort of like almost checked out at Brighton, the weird reaction he got from the crowd when he gave his kind of weird speech, having kind of mutually left the club a few days previously on the final day. I think if you want to be Brighton manager, you got to treat that as your number one job. And a lot of people go there as a stepping stone, but whilst they're there, give me everything you've got. And I think Roberto De Zerbi just checked out on Brighton, and that upset me. I didn't like it. It upset me. I found it disrespectful, and I hope, frankly, his coaching career goes down the tubes where it belongs. What you got for me?
I got a couple here for you. I'll just go quickly here. For me, one is Newcastle. I think Newcastle is the villain, and I only say that because we're all going to sleep on Newcastle going into next season, and that's when they finally might turn on the budget faucet and start paying all the money for all the superstars and make a charge. And I'll be very happy for our friend Ray Hudson, but for everybody else, it might turn into the Man City, Newcastle, and then everybody else type of league, which would be no fun for everybody. But man, Newcastle finishing 7th. everybody's going to kind of sleep on them for next year, even if they bring in a bunch of players. And I think that's going to be bad for everyone. Anybody who tries to break up the Palace front three this summer, that's going to be a villain for me, just looking ahead. And obviously, we'll be talking about that when we kind of reconvene during the summer tournaments. But they've been, I have a personal hatred for Palace because they have ruined multiple title bids for Liverpool since 2014. But as a neutral, it's fun to have a team in the mid tier that kind of has a thing, right? Whether they are the defensive, son of a bitch that you have to face, whether they're this free flowing attacking side like Palace with these three up front who have been remarkable. It's gonna suck if somebody tries to break that up, unless of course it's Liverpool and they buy one of those players. Then I'm all good with it. Don't worry about it. And my final one is Chelsea. Chelsea, you've got a good thing going. Like Pochettino has improved this squad, and yet I just know that they're going to screw it up. So from a Liverpool perspective, maybe they are a hero. But either Pochettino is going to get sacked, Pochettino is going to leave because he wants to leave. They're going to have to sell to Tom, you've put this, you've talked about this many a time on this show and on Sirius XMFC. They're going to have to sell players because of all the players they brought in. So the likes of Conor Gallagher, who have been good for them, are just going to have to go because they're going to be forced to sell players that they've developed. They from the outside looking in, you're like, oh man, they're starting to improve. That all these players they brought in that we made fun of, it's starting to look like a team. They've got some young guys coming up, and it's gonna blow up in their face because of they're gonna have to pay for their sins of the past, basically. So my final villain there is Chelsea for the end of the season.
I like the idea that some of our heroes and villains suggest there's going to be a reckoning at some point. There's never going to be a reckoning for anybody. Right, that is it for Week in the Tackle for this series. Dunny didn't turn up for the final one. He's like Steve Carell didn't turn up for the final series of The Office, but he'll maybe do a cameo at some point without speaking because of the writer's strike. Anyway, yeah, that was a deep cut Office reference. What of it?
It was really deep.
Deep cut, very deep cut. Congratulations to Dwight, though, on his wedding. Listen, we are going to be back for the Copa America and the European Championship at some point in June. Dunny's on holiday, Tim's on holiday, I'm on holiday. Tim, good luck finding a barn for your wedding. I wish you well, seeing every barn down the East Coast for the next few weeks, deciding you don't want a barn and then paying for a barn. We'll be back in a few weeks' time. Subscribe ahead of the new series, and I won't do any plugs because we ain't got a show next week. So we will see you in a few weeks when we've all got tans. Bye now.